Over the years, the United States has maintained a fine line between military enforcement and law enforcement when dealing with the most dangerous Mexican cartels. However, following the designation of these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations in January 2025, America has decided to resort to military tactics, including the deployment of heavy-duty machines like the 30,000 bunker buster. How damaging is this for the cartels? Could this be the beginning of the end of cartel operations in the United States? Join us as we uncover the game-changing deployment of America's bunker buster on Mexican cartels. For many years, the United States has been at the forefront of manufacturing some of the biggest upgrades in military tactics and weapons. The latter has been a huge part of the United States' identity, guiding it to the top of the pile amongst the strongest military in the world. While the country has created military enforcement, including fighter jets, warships, and aircraft carriers, which have been instrumental in its countless victories in numerous wars, a new type of problem seems to have forced the United States military into the creation of something bigger, stronger, something completely capable of fatal destruction regardless of its location. These new investments are called Massive Ordnance Penetrator, which are also known as MOPS. These bombs were designed to target countries with deep bunkers, like Yemen, Iraq, and all over the Middle East. Hence, with these specifications in mind, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator was created in 2011. This guided bomb unit was developed to weigh just over 30,000 pounds and 20.5 feet long, giving it the required length and mass to create a super blast upon impact with these underground bunkers. However, before Boeing created this behemoth of a bomb, the United States already had the MOAB, the Massive Ordnance Air Blast, or colloquially called the mother of all bombs. The bomb was designed to be completely thermobaric, meaning that upon deployment, the bomb uses the oxygen surrounding the environment where it is deployed to generate more pressure, which influences the range of the explosion. This fuel-air explosive is designed to disperse a huge cloud of aerosol in the air while it waits for a second ignition that triggers the aerosol-charged air, which then results in a massive fireball that travels on the oxygen all around the point of deployment and covers over 1.6 kilometers with its blast wave. Unlike the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, GBU-57, which was developed in 2011 and deployed sometime within the same year, the Massive Ordnance Air Blast was already developed in early 2003 and tested in the same year. However, it had never been used in real combat, as the United States always seemed to have other solutions to their threats, which included the deployment of other kinds of ammunition, or fighter jets, like the F-35 Lightning II or the B-2 Spirit bomber. But on April 2017, the United States deployed the 21,600 kilogram bomb from an aircraft on a pallet, which was then tugged aside by a parachute, allowing the weapon to glide down, stabilized and directed by 4 grid-like fins before falling on the Islamic State Khorasan tunnel complex in Aachen, Afghanistan. While the Mission Massive Ordnance Air Blast displayed the strength of the United States fuel-air bomb, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, was a completely different animal, a game-changer that can be even more destructive than the fuel-air explosive. The Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, might have never even existed before the Iraq invasion in 2003, when the United States intelligence reported that their bombs were useless against bunkers built out of reinforced concrete and steel. Hence, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, GBU-57, was born out of necessity. However, since the deployment of the Massive Ordnance Penetrator in 2011, the message was clear. While there was a possibility of hiding somewhere beneath the ground, when the mother of all bombs is in action, with blast waves traveling over 1 kilometer in every direction, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator cannot be hidden from. Owing to its 20-plus foot length and its 30,000-pound mass, it is targeted directly at the labyrinth of underground bunkers. For some context, imagine a bomb so heavy that it is only deployable from a B-2 Spirit bomber and is equipped with the tools to dig over 200 feet into the ground before it is ignited, shattering any network of bunkers which are carefully built into the desert. Although the GBU-57 bunker buster had been tested over the time of its creation until 2011, when it was finally being dispersed to the United States Air Force, or USAF, the bunker buster had not been deployed in real combat. However, 14 years after its creation and dispersion to the United States Air Force, the perfect opportunity for the deployment of the bunker buster arose. The United States received intelligence that Iran was on the verge of going nuclear, meaning that the country had suddenly gathered enough uranium, a common element used in manufacturing nuclear weapons. Over the years, the United States had warned Iran against crossing the threshold of weapons-grade uranium enrichment, or else it would consider striking them down. While Iran had been complaining for some time, it stopped as soon as it got the backing of the Kremlin, with whom it remains in an agreement to supply it with drones as the Russo-Ukrainian war continued. Following the threat assessment, the United States deemed it enough to go on an all-out war in an operation titled Midnight Hammer, sending its most dangerous ordnance penetrator to the Middle East on June 22, 2025. The first time that the guided bomb unit massive ordnance penetrator was ever deployed in real combat. The 14-ton bomb was fitted in B-2 Spirit bombers, the only aircraft that was designed to carry this 14-ton behemoth with 12 massive ordnance penetrators on the Fordo uranium enrichment plant and 2 on the Natanz nuclear facility, demolishing the underground uranium plants and crippling Iran's nuclear program. Although there have been reports that the program is not completely over, the deployment of the massive ordnance penetrators and the damage they created has spiraled into a massive setback for Iran's nuclear program. Following the success of Operation Midnight Hammer on June 22, 2025, the guided bomb unit massive ordnance penetrator had suddenly gained a reputation that spread like wildfire from the Middle East to Europe, and more importantly, South American countries like Mexico and Colombia. While the United States has recorded numerous prosecutions against the drug cartels in South America, dealing with them under the provisions of civil law, the cartels, especially in Mexico, continue to wax stronger. For some context, the influence of narcotics in the United States has continuously grown in leaps and bounds. But while they have credible intelligence, gathered from surveillance and arrests all around the country, the United States has found it incredibly difficult to handle or target the supply source, which comes from the hidden cartel labs in Mexico. But why not take the fight to the cartels in Mexico? Enter sovereignty. Mexico, as a sovereign state, has constituted authority over its borders, meaning that it could control who and what goes inside and out. While Mexico does not stand a chance in an all-out war against the United States, its constitutional right as a sovereign state makes it difficult for the United States to forcefully enter the country with boots on the ground without compliance from Mexico. While that difficulty has limited the power of the United States in a foreign territory, it has not limited its ambition, which is to make the United States a drug-free state and ensure that it never becomes the monster that it has been fighting since the early 20s, the narco states. However, with their ambitions stoked by the continuous bombardment of the United States-Mexico border by drug cartels and their runners, they planned an initiative that involved both countries in the operations to take on a common enemy, the cartels. First, they made the Merida Initiative in October 2007, where the United States, Mexico, and other South American countries, which are also narco states, were also looking for ways out of their cartel-sized problems. By 2008, the two countries had signed the initiative into law and immediately made headway in stopping some of the biggest drug busts in the history of the United States and Mexico at the time. In response, the Merida Initiative, a package of U.S. anti-drug and rule of law assistance to Mexico, began. As part of the Merida Initiative's focus on shared responsibility, the Mexican government pledged to tackle corruption. The U.S. government pledged to address drug demand and the illicit trafficking of firearms and bulk currency to Mexico. Both governments struggled to fulfill those commitments. While the initiative seemed to be working at the time, the Mexican government was not particularly at peace with the United States' continuous probing into their internal affairs, and described the initiative as too trigger-happy, especially as the United States continued to shoot on sight. The Mexican government stopped its communication with the United States in early 2018, reducing the amount of information that it was given to them. Although the United States tried to salvage the relationship between the two countries, Mexico had reached a decision that seemed impossible to overturn. By 2020, the relationship between the two countries had broken down, and there was no point of return. Following the breakdown of the Merida Initiative, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, also known by his initials AMLO, decided against renewing a joint task force between the two nations and chose to solve their internal problems following Mexican constitutional laws. As soon as the conversation failed between the two countries, the cartels in Mexico got braver and smarter, improving their operations with rare equipment and personnel that they did not used to have. The Mexican cartels soon joined forces with other cartels to create an easier network to get their narcotics into the United States, where most of their narcotics were sold. The Colombian cartels and the Venezuelan cartels produced the most cocaine in Latin America. Hence, they ferried it through the Mexican cartels, who worked the United States-Mexico border with their drug runners, but have recently upgraded their operations with drones. For some context, the Sinaloan cartel, a transnational criminal organization that deals in multiple smuggling operations, has recently been linked to the use of huge military-grade materials like unmanned aerial vehicles, especially drones. According to Robert Bunker, co-founder of the Small Wars Journal, in an email exchange with Insight Crime, when he was discussing the dangers of the upgraded operations in the cartels, he confirmed that drones serve multiple functions, including intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, as well as command and control in clashes between cartels, against Mexican state forces, or even against self-defense groups. Following the continuous use of drones and military-grade weapons in day-to-day operations by these transnational cartels, the United States felt the pressure heavily, with top officials in the American defense making claims that the cartels in Mexico could definitely strike back against the United States, using military-grade unmanned combat aerial vehicles, otherwise called UCAVs, as a weapon of choice. According to Stephen Willoughby, the acting director of the Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems Program Management Office in the United States Department of Homeland Security, nearly every day, transnational criminal organizations use drones to convey illicit narcotics and contraband across the United States borders and to conduct hostile surveillance of law enforcement, to assert his claims and fears and possibly force the hands of the United States into taking swift actions against the cartels. He gave more statistical data relating to the last 6 months of 2024, when over 27,000 drones were detected within 500 meters of the United States southern border, operating nearly 60,000 unique flights, the majority of which were conducted at night or at restricted altitudes, to smuggle the super addictive methamphetamine and fentanyl narcotics into the country. While his claims were valid and proven through data, the United States remained handicapped in solving the problems, as it could not dive headfirst, boots on the ground, into another sovereign state, regardless of the cause or information available. Soon, the cartel operations had begun to pile up. First, it was the death of American citizens who were killed in Matamoros, Mexico, in 2023, that led to the first serious consideration of moving the cartels up a notch from regular criminals to foreign terrorist organizations. Senator Lindsey Graham proposed the bill in March 2023 with other Republican senators who shared the same perspective. However, he was immediately ruled against by other members of Congress who could not handle the pressure of the politics that possibly came with designating the cartel as a part of the foreign terrorist organizations, because that would suggest that the United States suddenly has the prerogative to use military and possibly nuclear weapons against the cartels, regardless of their location. For some context, the United States had often leveled the big strongholds in Iraq, Iran, and Yemen using military weapons, including bombs, fighter jets, and huge missiles like the AGM-114 Hellfire missiles to rain hell. However, to create this possibility, the United States had to recognize the organizations in these countries as serious threats to national security and designate them as foreign terrorist organizations. To qualify as a terrorist organization meant that they had access to military-grade weapons, had serious involvement in espionage, and also had the military strength to engage in a fight against the United States. Hence, it is easy to see the reason why terrorist cells like Al-Qaeda and ISIS were designated as terrorist organizations. However, the United States at the time did not think that the cartels could have the ability not only to launder money, but also to have an organized paramilitary made up of veteran soldiers and access to aerial weapons that rival theirs. But the recent parade of the Mexican cartel's military might and ability to operate across multiple countries, including Asian and European countries, while laundering money through blockchain using Asian clients, was the perfect precedent to force the hands of the United States government into action. While Senator Lindsey Graham's bill was rejected, as it got lost in different interpretations and nuances of the rule of law, the 2025 administration of President Donald Trump, which was kickstarted in January of the same year, designated the cartels in Latin America with the ability to transact with multiple criminal organizations from different parts of the world as foreign terrorist organizations. In simpler terms, President Donald Trump's administration had suddenly declared open season on these cartels. Some of these designated notorious cartels are the Sinaloa Cartel, the Knight Templar Cartel, and the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, all of which are now under the microscope of the Pentagon. While these cartel routes have been stopped dead in their tracks, with continuous reports of intercepted drug shipments and frozen accounts, mass extradition from Mexico has been the headlining news. Following the United States' decision to designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations in January 2025, the Mexican government decided again on a collaboration with the United States, but with more relaxed rules on meting out punishments, especially the death penalty. For some context, in February 2025, the Mexican government extradited 29 alleged drug cartel members to the United States, including high-profile gang leaders who have been on the relentless radar of the United States. Those extradited include notorious drug lord Rafael Caro Quintero, who has been wanted by the United States for the murder of an American agent 40 years ago. While this was not the first case of extradition between the United States and Mexico, an exodus of 29 Mexican narcotic dealers being extradited at a go is considered to be of the biggest extraditions in Mexico's history and is seen as a major step in bilateral security relations between the two countries, repairing bridges that had been burnt between them since the demise of the Merida Initiative. Although it comes after the United States President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on imports from Mexico in early January, accusing Mexico of failing to tackle drug trafficking and mass migration, the Mexican government gave in anyway, and without complaints. However, every time the President of the United States tried to recreate an initiative close to the Merida Initiative of the late 2000s, President Claudia Sheinbaum has refused his every advance, following in the same path as Andrés Manuel López Obrador, popularly known as AMLO, who also refused the United States, a boots-on-ground operational freedom in Mexico. But one thing continues to stand out. Even with the extradition and heavy crackdown on the cartels, the Mexican cartels, especially the Sinaloa cartel, have continuously pushed the envelope, using even sea routes to gain entry into the United States. For some context, the United States seized over 700,000 pounds of methamphetamine precursors on September 3, 2025. According to the United States Attorney Pirro, this was the largest seizure of precursor chemicals used to manufacture methamphetamine in the history of America. China was sending over 700,000 pounds on the high seas to the Sinaloa cartel before they were seized after an open war in the seas. Pirro believed that the success of the operations hinged on President Trump and Secretary Rubio declaring the Sinaloa cartel a foreign terrorist organization. Hence, they could strike faster and hit harder than they used to. While the United States intelligence seems to have its bases covered over the land and seas, drastically reducing the amount of methamphetamine being produced by crippling their precursor supplies, it wasn't enough, as the United States had allegedly made a discovery of an underground lab beneath the rainforests of Mexico, where this poison is still being cooked. Whether the United States and Mexico can decide on letting America unleash the 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, bunker buster, on this underground labyrinth of drug labs, or President Claudia Sheinbaum stands her ground on the sovereignty of Mexico, only time will tell. The Mexico cartel facility had been operating for months under perfect cover. The triple-layer jungle canopy made aerial detection nearly impossible. Intelligence agencies knew something big was happening in the region, but didn't know how best to attack until the United States got involved. What happened next showcased exactly why the Warthog earned its fearsome reputation. How does one jet completely destroy a facility that big with pinpoint accuracy? And more importantly, how did this 1970 engineering solve a 21st century problem that billion-dollar stealth fighters couldn't touch? Join us as we dive deep into the heart of the sting operation and uncover the impressive features of the A-10 Warthog. The objective of the mission was to destroy the cartel drug lab in the remote terrain. This came as a result of months of intelligence gathering, informants, and satellite images. Despite all these, the dense jungle vegetation prevented adequate surveillance for the local enforcement to carry out a proper sting operation. When the United States got wind of this information, they decided the best jet for the mission was the A-10 Warthog. Miles away from any official patrol routes, the cartel drug lab was running at full capacity. All around them, the thick jungle canopy worked like nature's own camouflage net and kept the whole operation invisible from above. Nobody within the cartel had any clue what was about to happen. Then the sound of the A-10 broke through the canopy with its distinctive straight wings, the armored cockpit, and the most devastating weapon ever built, the GAU-8 Avenger. What made this strike remarkable wasn't just the precision, it was how surgically clean everything went down. The laser-guided targeting meant every single round hit exactly where it needed to. Chemical processing equipment got shredded, storage tanks erupted in flames, and packaging facilities disintegrated. But here's the thing, not one civilian got hurt in the process. The timing was perfect. For weeks, they had been meticulously tracking the cartel's movement and patterns and knew precisely when to strike to avoid hitting civilians. There were only a few workers on site when they first heard the roar of those GAU-8 rounds. They ran for their lives into the jungle before even knowing what was going on. They all thought it was either an equipment breakdown or a rival cartel hit. The possibility that this was a military aircraft didn't even cross their mind. Within minutes of the smoke clearing, local law enforcement suddenly appeared from seemingly nowhere. Turns out they had been positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, ready to move in once the shooting stopped. That's where the design of the A-10 really stands out. The reason the GAU-8 cannon is so huge is not all about its raw force. It's about how surgically powerful it is. It can stay for hours waiting for the right time to hit its mark. Those twin turbofan engines are way more fuel efficient than fighter jet power plants, so they can spend hours on reconnaissance without having to land and refuel constantly. This is possible due to the titanium armor bathtub surrounding the pilot if things go hairy in hostile territory. Even if cartel forces possessed surface-to-air missiles or heavy machine guns, the A-10 can take the hit that would ground other aircraft. The design specifications are impressive. Engineers considered the potential consequences of half the tail being blown off or one engine failing. They made it possible for such attacks not to bring down the aircraft. 1,200 pounds of titanium armor, called the bathtub by pilots, surrounds the cockpit and critical flight controls. This is no flimsy metal can. It's a real titanium armor plating, up to 3.8 centimeters thick, in areas reportedly more vulnerable to incoming fire. Everything about the armor system was developed on bullet trajectories and how shells ricochet off of angled surfaces. They knew precisely where the worst of it would be, so engineers were able to design the armor plating for those areas. Almost 6% of the aircraft's total weight is titanium. That's how much they prioritized ensuring that pilots still remain as alive as possible. It has been tested to withstand 23mm cannon rounds and will deflect the fragments. Here is the detail that many miss. Every surface on the inside of the craft with which the pilot will come in contact is covered by multiple layers of nylon shields. This will bounce off the tiny metal fragment that splashes off the armoring when a round strikes it, because even behind the main armor, pilots could still be wounded without those shields, so they thought about an all-round protection for them. When Captain Kim Campbell took massive damage over Baghdad, her A-10 lost an engine and the hydraulics got shredded, forcing her to fly manual controls for nearly an hour. Most aircraft would have been smoking holes in the ground, but Campbell brought hers home intact. That flight became legendary because it demonstrated the true potential of the bathtub concept, taking hits that would have severely injured any other pilot in any other aircraft, then flying for an hour on backup systems. That is not luck. That is engineering specifically designed to bring people home alive. The A-10 was designed to operate from rough forward bases and makeshift runways, where engine damage from debris is typically a significant concern. But those General Electric TF-34GE 100 turbofans sit way up high on the fuselage, which keeps them away from all the rocks and dirt that jet engines hate. Plus, this setup means ground crews can keep the engines running while they are loading weapons and fuel, a huge time saver when missions are stacking up. Those engines are heavy beasts, so they need serious support. 4 massive bolts connect each engine pylon to the airframe. Overkill by most standards, but necessary when the aircraft's designed to take battle damage and keep flying. Here is something interesting about the engine design. They have a 6-to-1 bypass ratio, which means they run cooler than typical military engines. That translates to a smaller heat signature, making the aircraft harder for infrared-seeking missiles to lock onto. The positioning helps too. Exhaust gets directed over the tailplanes, which shields the hot gases from ground-based heat-seeking missiles looking up from below. It's one of those design choices that seems weird until the reasoning becomes clear. Most military aircraft prioritize speed and maneuverability, but the A-10's engineers focused on survivability and operational flexibility. Being able to operate from damaged airfields while being harder to detect, that's the kind of thinking that keeps aircraft flying missions when everything else is grounded. The fuel system's built like a fortress within a fortress. All 4 main tanks sit clustered near the aircraft's center, completely separated from the fuselage walls. That means any projectile has to punch through the outer skin first, then travel through space before it can even reach a fuel tank's exterior. But here is where it gets really clever. Those fuel transfer lines automatically seal themselves when they get hit. If the damage is too severe for the self-sealing system to handle, check valves kick in and prevent fuel from flowing into that compromised tank. Most of the fuel system components live inside the tanks themselves, so if something breaks, it doesn't create external leaks. The whole refueling system gets purged clean after every use too. Inside each tank, there's this reticulated polyurethane foam lining both the inner and outer walls. When projectiles tear through, this foam catches debris and keeps fuel from sloshing around or spilling out everywhere. Fire protection doesn't stop there either. Heavy firewalls separate the engines from everything else, backed up by dedicated fire suppression systems. The engineers really thought through every possible failure mode. Even if catastrophic damage somehow takes out all 4 main fuel tanks, there is still a backup plan. 2 self-sealing sump tanks carry enough fuel for 230 miles of flight, not much for a cross-country trip, but plenty to get back to friendly territory or reach an emergency landing strip. At the heart of the A-10 is that vast 30 by 173 millimeter GAU-8/A Avenger autocannon. This monster is one of the most destructive aircraft weapons ever used in battle, a mechanized 7-barrel rotary cannon designed for shredding tanks and armored vehicles. Once it hits its stride, 65 to 70 rounds blast out every second after that. The precision is strong for something this powerful. From 4,000 feet altitude, 80% of shots land within a 40-foot circle. That's surgical accuracy when firing depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds at such an insane rate. The whole system works best at what's called a slant range of 4,000 feet, basically the A-10 diving down at a 30-degree angle, which happens to be the perfect attack geometry for busting tanks. Here is something wild. The entire aircraft was designed around this gun. Engineers mounted the GAU-8 slightly off to the left side, but the barrel that's firing sits on the right, keeping everything lined up with the aircraft's center line. And behind all that firepower is the 5'11" tall, theoretically 1,350 round, 30mm ammo drum. In reality, it has about 1,174 rounds, which is still enough to spoil anyone's day. The Air Force, too, wasn't risking enemy fire. They sheathed the drum in armor plates of varying thicknesses, intended to detonate incoming shells before they could strike the ammunition contained within. Most A-10s pack AGM-65 Maverick missiles as their go-to standoff weapon. These systems utilize either TV guidance or infrared targeting to hit targets far beyond cannon range, keeping pilots safely away from surface-to-air threats. During Desert Storm, crews got creative with the Maverick's infrared camera. Since the A-10 didn't have proper night vision gear back then, They basically used the missile's targeting system as a makeshift FLIR for nighttime missions. The weapons loadout doesn't stop there. Cluster bombs, Hydra 70 rocket pods, GPS-guided munitions like the GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, paveway laser-guided bombs, JDAMs, and basically anything that goes boom and fits on a pylon. There's also the AGM-154 joint standoff weapon for hitting targets from a serious distance. Standard defensive gear includes an ALQ-131 electronic countermeasures pod under one wing and a pair of AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles under the other. The ECM pod jams enemy radar while the Sidewinders handle any fighters that get too close for comfort. Since A-10s spend their time hugging the deck at relatively slow speeds, staying invisible matters more than looking cool. Over the years, the Air Force has tried all sorts of paint schemes. There was the peanut scheme with sand, yellow, and field drab colors. Winter ops have black and white patterns. Some aircraft sported mixed tan, green, and brown schemes. The most recognizable Cold War setup was European woodland camouflage, dark green, medium green, and dark gray, designed to blend in with typical European forests. This scheme assumed enemy fighters posed a bigger threat than ground fire, so the focus was on blending in when viewed from above. Everything changed with the Gulf War, and priorities changed. Soon the real threats were coming from the ground, rather than air-to-air combat, and the Compass Ghost scheme was born. This top is grayish-black, while the underside is light gray, the ultimate shirt for Winchester when fighting from the ground up. The 355th Tactical Training Wing at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona received the first A-10s in March 1976. Aircraft wear is a factor, however, and the 354th Tactical Fighter Wing at Myrtle Beach Air Force Base in South Carolina became the first operationally capable unit in October '77. The thing is, of course, plenty of Air Force pilots were less than thrilled about the A-10 arriving to ruin their shiny airfields. When people think of fighter jets, they immediately imagine sleek designs barreling through the skies at speeds rivaling or exceeding that of sound. And then there is the Warthog. No, it's not quick, and it isn't sleek or pretty looking, but it gets the job done. Officers who join the Air Force often dislike operating A-10s because they believe the aircraft is less sophisticated. They usually dream of flying interceptors and air superiority fighters like the F-22. So being assigned to an A-10 is seen as a step down. Things changed again in '87 when many A-10s got reassigned to forward air control duties and redesignated as OA-10s. In this role, they typically carry up to 6 pods of 2.75-inch Hydra rockets, usually loaded with smoke or white phosphorus warheads for marking targets. The OA-10 designation was basically just paperwork, though. These aircraft stayed physically identical and could still bring the pain when needed. The forward air control mission made perfect sense for the A-10. Who better to coordinate close air support than pilots flying the ultimate close air support platform? They understood the mission better than anyone. The A-10s sat out the initial invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. That changed in March 2002 when squadrons got deployed to Pakistan and Bagram Air Base for Operation Anaconda, the big push against Taliban and al-Qaeda forces. Once they arrived, those warthogs never really left, staying busy hunting down whatever remained of both groups. Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off on March 20th, 2003, with 60 OA-10s and A-10s joining the opening wave. The Air Force later released some interesting numbers about that campaign. During the initial invasion phase, A-10s maintained an 85% mission-capable rate, pretty impressive for aircraft operating in harsh desert conditions while taking enemy fire. Those GAU-8 cannons got a serious workout too. Pilots burned through 311,597 rounds of 30mm ammunition during the invasion. The aircraft also flew 32 missions dropping propaganda leaflets, which seems almost quaint compared to everything else they were doing. The campaign wasn't without losses though. One A-10 got shot down near Baghdad International Airport late in the fighting. September 2007 marked a major milestone when the A-10C, with its precision engagement upgrade, reached initial operating capability. This wasn't just a minor tweak. The digital avionics and communication systems completely transformed how quickly pilots could find and engage close air support targets. The 104th Fighter Squadron from the Maryland Air National Guard took the upgraded A-10Cs to Iraq in 2007, becoming the first unit to deploy the new variant in combat. The difference was immediately obvious. Missions that used to take forever to coordinate now happened in minutes instead of hours. Unfortunately, not all A-10 stories have a silver lining. Tragedy struck on December 8, 1988, when an A-10A from United States Air Forces in Europe crashed into an apartment building at Remscheid, West Germany, fatally injuring the pilot and 6 civilians. In another incident, the aircraft slammed through the upper floors of a building. Another 50 were injured. Both of the crashed aircraft and pilots were dealing with terrible weather and spatial disorientation. The story gets a bit more complicated. The rates of cancer in that neighborhood rose precipitously over the subsequent years. That prompted some to question whether the A-10 was loaded with depleted uranium ammunition, something the United States denied at the time. Then there is the really bizarre case from April 2, 1997. Captain Craig Button was flying an A-10 from Davis-Monthan when something went seriously wrong. Instead of following his planned route, Button flew hundreds of miles off course without saying a word on the radio. He never tried to eject, and the aircraft eventually crashed. Investigators couldn't come up with any explanation except a deliberate act to intentionally crash the aircraft, which is pretty much the only thing that makes sense given how everything played out. The whole incident sparked massive speculation about what Button was thinking and where he might have been headed. It took 3 weeks before anyone found the crash site. Here is the kicker. That A-10 was carrying live bombs when it went down, and they were never recovered. Somewhere out there in the wilderness, those munitions are still sitting where Button's aircraft came to rest, a grim reminder that even the most reliable aircraft can't account for human factors. So there it is, the complete story of how one aircraft went from being the unwanted stepchild of the Air Force to becoming the most feared close support platform on the planet. The A-10 Warthog is not just some relic from the Cold War that somehow stuck around. It's proof that sometimes the best solution is not the flashiest or most expensive one. Think about it. While everyone else was chasing speed and stealth, Fairchild built something that could absorb punishment, deliver devastating firepower, and keep pilots alive in the worst possible conditions. Those titanium bathtubs, redundant systems, and that massive GAU-8 cannon weren't accidents. They were deliberate choices made by engineers who understood what close air support really meant. From those early days when fighter pilots didn't want anything to do with it, to modern operations where ground commanders specifically requested A-10 support over everything else, this aircraft earned its reputation the hard way. Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, every conflict proved the same thing. When soldiers need help and need it fast, nothing else comes close to what the Warthog delivers. Sure, there's constant talk about retirement and replacement programs. The F-35 gets thrown around as the future of everything. But here's the reality. After 50 years of service, the A-10 is still doing missions that billion-dollar stealth fighters can't touch. Whether it's surgical strikes in jungle clearings or supporting troops in urban combat, this aircraft keeps proving that good engineering beats fancy marketing every single time. The real question isn't whether the A-10 will eventually get retired. Everything does eventually. The question is whether whatever replaces it will be half as effective at the mission it was actually designed for, bringing the fight to the enemy while bringing pilots home alive. For the first time, the United States Navy unleashed a weapon that has made drug cartels tremble in the Pacific. Hidden for years under top-secret programs, the laser system Helios strikes faster than any missile and costs mere dollars per shot. Could this technology finally turn the tide against billion-dollar smuggling networks? And what shocking footage reveals the true power of lasers at sea? Will the cartels ever recover? Join us as we find out what happens when the United States Navy's laser weapons go to battle against the cartels. The USS Preble was cutting through the Pacific in October 2024, carrying a weapon no warship had ever tested in real-world conditions. Buried under layers of secrecy sat the Navy's new high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance system, known simply as Helios. This was not just another piece of military hardware. It was about to prove itself in action for the first time. Naval intelligence had been following strange activity near the California coast. Small, fast boats were moving drugs at night, and whenever Coast Guard cutters moved in, drones suddenly appeared overhead. These weren't amateurs trying their luck. Cartel groups had turned smuggling into coordinated military-style operations. Their speedboats could push past 60 miles an hour while carrying loads of cocaine worth more than $20 million. Meanwhile, the drones circling above provided real-time video to handlers on shore. The result was that the cartels always seemed one step ahead, making traditional interdictions nearly useless. That was about to change. With Helios on board, the Navy no longer had to waste $4.3 million Standard Missile-6 interceptors on drones that cost only a few $1,000s each. Instead, the laser system could fire at a cost of about $13 per shot. The weapon drew 120 kilowatts directly from the ship's own electrical system, removing the need to carry ammunition or resupply mid-mission. The way it works is both simple and extraordinary. Fiber optic cables generate separate beams of light that are combined into one powerful stream. This method, called spectral beam combining, produces temperatures hot enough to burn through a steel engine or set a drone's body ablaze in seconds. Unlike missiles or bullets that travel through the air, laser energy moves at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. Against cartel speedboats, this meant instant results. Many of the engines contained aluminum parts that vaporized under the heat. Crews often abandoned ship the moment they saw smoke rising from the stern. The drugs, however, stayed on board, making it easier for authorities to recover the evidence and cripple billion-dollar trafficking routes. The system tracks its targets through a mix of thermal sensors and radar. Unlike conventional weapons, it never runs out of ammunition. That made it particularly effective against the drone swarms the cartels had started using to overwhelm border patrols. What once required multiple ships and costly interceptors could now be handled in seconds by a single vessel equipped with Helios. There were limits, however. The weather along the Gulf Coast sometimes made things tricky. Heavy moisture in the air could scatter the beam, forcing operators to adjust power or wait for conditions to improve. Smugglers were quick to adapt, timing large-scale runs to coincide with storm seasons when laser weapons were less reliable. Even with these challenges, the Navy is already looking ahead. Plans are in motion to expand Helios to 300 kilowatts for use on future DDGX destroyers and next-generation frigates. Right now, only larger ships with advanced power systems can support the huge energy and cooling requirements. Smaller patrol boats, which would benefit greatly, simply don't have the infrastructure to carry the system yet. Helios is also linked to the Aegis combat system, giving ships layered defenses against both air and surface threats. Its optical dazzler offers another option. Instead of destroying a target, it can blind cameras and sensors. That allows intelligence officers to capture cartel data without losing the chance to analyze it. Military leaders see directed energy weapons like Helios as the next step in naval warfare. The cost advantage alone is significant, neutralizing cheap but numerous threats without draining budgets. More importantly, the system keeps crews safe and ensures the Navy maintains control over contested waters. The footage from that October mission remains under wraps, but the signal to cartels and other adversaries is unmistakable. While laser systems at sea reshaped how navies intercept smugglers and drones, the skies required an entirely different kind of breakthrough. The real question became, what happens when the world's most expensive bomber is paired with a weapon that costs less than a cup of coffee to fire? The Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit, better known as the stealth bomber, carries a staggering price tag of about $2.1 billion per aircraft. Every mission burns through hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel and support costs before the bomber even releases a single weapon. Conventional precision munitions only add to the expense. Air-to-ground missiles range anywhere from $100,000 to $4 million each. Military leaders started asking how long the United States could afford to fight drawn-out conflicts when opponents were fielding cheap drones and disposable hardware. That concern sparked a quiet but ambitious effort. Defense contractors began working laser technology into existing aircraft under classified upgrade programs. As part of its latest modernization, the B-2 Spirit received experimental laser pods designed to hit both ground targets and airborne threats. Instead of loading heavy racks of missiles or bombs, the system draws power directly from the plane's electrical generators. This cuts down payload weight and removes many of the limits imposed by conventional ordnance. The change in cost was staggering. Each laser shot came in at roughly $15. A bomber that once needed million-dollar cruise missiles to take out hardened targets could now destroy dozens for the cost of a single traditional warhead. For long campaigns against enemies with endless numbers but limited sophistication, the economics suddenly tilted sharply in America's favor. Adversaries, however, did not stand still. Many began deploying large swarms of cheap drones, launching them in the hundreds to overwhelm defenses. Conventional missile batteries quickly ran into a problem. Ammunition ran out fast, and each interceptor missile cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Analysts calculated that, over time, enemies could bleed American defenses dry simply by throwing waves of expendable machines into the fight. Laser weapons erase that problem. Because they rely only on power from the aircraft, they can fire continuously without running out of ammunition. As long as the generators keep producing electricity, the beam can keep firing. In practical terms, this gave bombers something close to unlimited ammunition. Nuclear-powered ships and advanced electrical grids provided even greater endurance for extended operations. The combination of the B-2's stealth and its new directed energy weapons created a tactical edge no adversary had faced before. Radar operators might detect the bright streak of a missile launch, but laser strikes left almost no trace, only a brief flash of heat when the target was hit. That meant bombers could destroy multiple threats without giving away their position to nearby defenses. There were limits, of course. Lasers are still shaped by the environment. Dust, moisture, and rain scatter the energy beam and reduce its reach. Mission planners now include detailed weather forecasts in their operational checklists. On clear nights with dry air, the system is at its most lethal. This shift has already begun to influence how money is spent. Budgets that once poured into producing mountains of ammunition are being redirected into developing higher output lasers and more powerful generators to sustain them. The focus is moving from stockpiling shells and missiles to investing in renewable energy systems that can keep weapons firing as long as the plane remains airborne. Bomber crews are also being retrained. Unlike traditional bombs, lasers don't explode on impact. They require steady, precise contact with a target for several seconds. Pilots now practice flying patterns that hold beams on moving objects, while operators train on power management to make sure the weapons never drain the system during intense engagements. The shift represents more than just new technology. Strategists see it as a change in how wars will be fought and financed. Victory in modern conflict depends not only on advanced weapons, but also on the ability to fight for months or years without exhausting resources. With the B-2 Spirit now carrying directed energy systems, the United States military has shown that it is preparing for that future, one where cost-effective firepower and technological superiority go hand in hand. In the Red Sea, Iranian-backed forces discovered a profitable new market when Mexican cartels offered cryptocurrency in exchange for modern weapons. The Houthis, already armed with drones, guided munitions, and electronic warfare systems, found eager buyers in organizations flush with cash from fentanyl sales. With billions generated annually through drug trafficking, cartels could afford battlefield-proven equipment that American law enforcement had never faced at home. The trade was managed through encrypted networks overseen by Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers in Yemen. Cartels supplied chemical precursors for explosives, while in return they received completed drones, radar jammers, and even anti-ship missiles. These deals bypassed black market arms dealers and avoided international sanctions designed to stop dangerous weapons from spreading to non-state actors. By early 2024, Houthis were attacking United States Navy destroyers in the Red Sea with kamikaze drones and cruise missiles. Within months, similar systems surfaced along the Texas border. Border Patrol agents began to encounter drone swarms flying in formation, copying the same tactics seen overseas against commercial shipping. What had once been fast boat smuggling runs evolved into militarized campaigns. Cartels now fielded drones with thermal cameras for surveillance, jammers to cut police radios, and even explosive-laden suicide drones used against rivals. This level of sophistication posed a crisis that ordinary policing could not contain. Iranian advisors deepened the threat by training cartel fighters directly. In camps hidden across Mexico and Central America, former Houthi drone operators taught everything from electronic warfare to coordinated strike tactics. These programs produced a new generation of cartel technicians who could build, maintain, and deploy weapons that rivaled those used in war zones. The network came to light when United States intelligence traced cryptocurrency movements, linking cartel accounts to Middle Eastern operators. Investigators matched payment schedules to known Houthi weapons purchases, proving that American drug demand was indirectly funding militants engaged in live combat with United States forces abroad. Soon, American police and border units began reporting weapons they had never seen outside of combat zones, night vision devices built for the battlefield, encrypted satellite communications, and armor-piercing ammunition. Local shootouts started to resemble clashes in foreign war zones, with gangs wielding tools meant to fight national militaries. Financial assessments confirmed the core problem. Cartels now commanded revenues greater than the defense budgets of many nations. With money on that scale, they could buy nearly any weapon on the global market. This economic power meant that criminal organizations inside the United States borders had the resources of a hostile state, turning a law enforcement challenge into a national security emergency. While Iranian weapons continued moving south through established channels, Mexican cartels were busy building something that caught intelligence agencies completely off guard. The pressing question became, what happens when criminal organizations begin producing military hardware faster than governments can track it? Using just the profits from a single fentanyl shipment valued at around $200 million, cartels set up underground aerospace manufacturing sites. These weren't makeshift workshops or hobbyist drone operations. They were full-scale facilities staffed with engineers who had once worked for legitimate defense contractors. Production lines inside disguised warehouses and abandoned mines were turning out as many as 50 advanced unmanned aerial vehicles every month, hidden from satellite detection by carefully built hangars and underground infrastructure. The Sinaloa cartel also managed to purchase 12 Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drones, aircraft already proven on battlefields in Ukraine and Syria. Instead of mounting explosives, cartel technicians reconfigured the payload bays to carry up to 500 pounds of compressed fentanyl. A single flight could deliver enough narcotics to saturate the East Coast drug market for half a year. The cartel's surveillance capacity transformed almost overnight. Persistent drone patrols equipped with thermal sensors and secure communication links provided constant updates on border patrol movements, high-altitude balloon locations, and law enforcement patrol patterns. Coordinated formations used artificial intelligence software originally designed for military swarm tactics, giving cartels real-time command over wide stretches of the border. Materials science also became part of their playbook. Factories began producing airframes out of carbon fiber and other advanced composites, giving drones more speed and endurance compared to aluminum-bodied aircraft. Many suppliers who sold the raw materials assumed they were dealing with ordinary commercial buyers and never questioned the unusual order volumes. Quality standards inside these underground factories rivaled those found in legitimate aerospace production lines. Cartel ingenuity extended into the seas as well. Narco submarines, once crude vessels for smuggling, evolved into autonomous carriers able to launch aerial drones while submerged. This created layered surveillance networks that existing interdiction methods could not detect, much less disrupt. Each submarine carried as many as 20 small drones, each with the endurance to remain airborne for more than 8 hours. Electronic warfare soon entered the picture. During clashes with rivals and law enforcement, cartels began deploying jammers and radar spoofing equipment. These systems disrupted police communications and even interfered with civilian aviation networks during smuggling runs. Much of the hardware and training came directly from Iranian sources, with instructors operating from bases in Central America. Autonomy made the threat even more dangerous. New targeting systems allowed drones to identify and pursue vehicles or people without any human operator in control. Facial recognition programs and vehicle matching algorithms enabled aircraft to track targets across state lines for days at a time. Police suddenly faced flying weapons that behaved more like hunter-killer machines than surveillance tools. By the early 2010s, the global drone market was worth an estimated $42 billion, and cartels were a part of it. Through front companies, they poured money into universities, startups, and artificial intelligence firms. Many researchers never realized their civilian projects were being adapted for cartel weapons programs. With mass production, costs plunged. Each combat-ready drone could be built for under $10,000. That meant a single drug shipment worth $50 million could finance as many as 5,000 drones. This direct link between narcotics profits and weapons development created exponential growth in cartel military strength. For the United States military, few options remained. Conventional airstrikes against these hidden factories risked heavy civilian casualties in densely populated areas. Strategic bombers armed with precision lasers emerged as the only realistic counter. Unlike explosive munitions, directed energy weapons could destroy underground entrances, manufacturing equipment, and command centers with surgical accuracy, carrying out strikes inside the United States territory without triggering the kind of devastation that traditional weapons would cause. Cartel breakthroughs in drone technology grabbed headlines, but America's investment in laser weapons gave the United States a clear advantage. Unlike missiles or conventional guns, directed energy systems have a major edge. They perform best in the very conditions that smugglers depend on. In many ways, nature itself has become an ally for the United States' defense. Could the very skies the cartels rely on actually be working against them? By 2023, military planners had figured out how to use weather and air conditions to know when lasers would work best. Some people pointed out possible limits, but in fact, these conditions usually gave the United States an advantage over the cartels. Clear skies, low humidity, and stable temperatures, the most common conditions along key border areas, allow lasers to strike targets with pinpoint accuracy, almost instantly. The deserts of Arizona and New Mexico tell a similar story. Cartels counted on heat to shield their drones, but the clear desert air helps lasers travel unimpeded. With minimal moisture or clouds, targets can be disabled long before they cross into United States territory. In this setting, dry landscapes became a natural ally for defense forces. Altitude works similarly. The higher a drone flies, the thinner the air becomes, meaning there's less to block or scatter the laser beam. This allows military lasers to stay tightly focused, deliver more energy to their target, and hit with devastating precision. Ironically, cartel drones trying to escape by flying higher only made them more visible to United States sensors, making it easier for operators to track, target, and disable them. The weather could pose a challenge. Fog, dust, heavy storms, or sudden rain showers can scatter light and slightly reduce a laser's effectiveness. Yet the United States systems are built to handle these obstacles. Satellites and radar provide real-time tracking, while conventional interceptors back up the lasers when nature tries to interfere. On most days, clear skies, dry air, and stable temperatures give American defenses a natural advantage. By the end of the day, the cartel's massive investments in drones rarely paid off. Instead of shielding them, the atmosphere often magnified the effectiveness of the United States' lasers. Sunlight, desert air, and thin, high-altitude conditions became silent allies, turning the sky into a vast, invisible extension of America's shield, a force the cartels could neither hide from nor fight. The cartels thought their drones and smuggling tricks gave them an advantage, but the United States Navy's laser weapon changed that. Quiet, accurate, and powerful, it turns the skies the cartels counted on into a place they can't control. After years of speculation, people around the world can finally see the United States Navy's laser weapon in action against cartel operations. For the first time, the power, speed, and precision of this technology are on full display. It shows how modern weapons can stop threats almost instantly without the need for traditional explosives or bullets. The lesson is clear. The future of fighting crime and warfare has arrived, and the balance of power has shifted in favor of those who can control the skies. The cartels have money, weapons, and power, and for years they've evaded U.S. forces, but there's one fatal mistake that would seal their fate: targeting a U.S. national treasure. For decades, the B-2 spirit has struck from the shadows, silent and unstoppable. But after its fearsome display in the Middle East, whispers began spreading. Cartel strongholds are now rumored to be arming heat-seeking missiles and planning to shoot down the bomber. Could they really pull it off? Or would it trigger something far worse? Join us as we reveal what happens when a drug cartel tries to take down the U.S. bomber. The B-2 Spirit is one of the most advanced military aircraft ever created, designed by Northrop Grumman to serve as the cornerstone of the United States' strategic bombing capability. It was conceived not for speed or dogfighting, but for invisibility. Operating at the intersection of aerospace engineering and stealth warfare, this bomber is intended to penetrate deep into enemy territory without detection, delivering precision strikes with devastating payloads. The aircraft's defining feature is its flying wing configuration, a design that lacks a vertical stabilizer in traditional fuselage. This aerodynamic structure, combined with specialized radar-absorbing materials, allows the B-2 to remain undetected by most enemy defense systems. Its smooth, tailless shape helps deflect radar waves, while the outer coating, composed of classified radar-absorbent polymers known as RAM, absorbs what little radar signal remains. This paint alone represents a classified but critical part of the aircraft's effectiveness, shared in concept with other stealth jets like the F-22 and F-35. Beneath the B-2 composite skin lies a reinforced frame built from high-strength steel, enabling the wings to flex during flight. The external shell includes a complex mix of materials: fiberglass epoxy along the edges for radar deflection, graphite epoxy across the main wing surface for strength and lightness, and titanium around engine areas to withstand intense heat. Fiberglass polyamide is also used, and it is chosen for its heat resistance and radar-absorbing qualities. Even the cruise station assembly contains aluminum at the base for structural balance. To reduce its thermal signature, the aircraft houses its engines deep within the body. Air is drawn from concealed intakes, and exhaust is cooled before being released, minimizing the heat trail that modern missiles typically rely on to lock onto targets. This design ensures the B-2 remains elusive, not only to radar but also to infrared tracking systems. Despite its complexity, the B-2 operates with a crew of only two, a pilot and a mission commander. They sit side by side in a compact cockpit equipped with a suite of highly sophisticated avionics. These include systems for fuel regulation, weapon targeting, navigation, and terrain tracking, all of which enable missions to continue seamlessly, even in darkness or hostile terrain. For emergencies, the cockpit is fitted with ejection seats, a rare feature in strategic bombers of this scale and cost. The bomber's capability is as imposing as its stealth. It can carry both conventional and nuclear weapons, offering flexibility across tactical and strategic missions. Its internal bay can be configured for different payloads. One option includes up to 80 MiG-82 bombs, each weighing 500 pounds, fitted to a suspension system capable of delivering roughly 40,000 pounds of gravity-based ordnance. Alternatively, the bay can accommodate a rotary launcher system for 16 AGM-158 cruise missiles, each with a range of 230 miles and an estimated cost of $1.5 million. Once released, these missiles deploy wings mid-flight and autonomously guide themselves to their target. Although it is not built for speed, the B-2 has extraordinary endurance. It can travel over 6,000 miles without refueling and far more with in-air refueling support. Its cruising altitude reaches up to 50,000 feet, well above commercial aircraft, and its silent presence often goes unnoticed until the damage is already done. With an estimated price exceeding $2 billion per unit, the B-2 Spirit is among the most expensive aircraft ever built. Fewer than 24 exist, and each is treated as a strategic asset of national importance. Missions are rare, deliberate, and heavily safeguarded, reinforcing the bomber's role as a last resort instrument of war. On the other hand, drug cartels operating across Latin America, particularly in nations like Mexico and Colombia, are not mere criminal gangs, but vast, sophisticated networks with extraordinary financial resources, firepower, and political reach. In many regions, these groups function more like private armies or parallel governments, exerting control over local police forces, municipal authorities, and even national institutions. Their influence is sustained not only through violence but also through strategic generosity, providing food, jobs, and protection to underserved communities, thereby securing local loyalty. The wealth of these organizations is staggering. Cartels such as the Sinaloa Cartel, and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel rake in billions of dollars annually, primarily through the trafficking of drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl. These narcotics are produced at minimal cost and sold at immense profit, especially in the United States and Europe. Some cartels, like Escobar's Medellin cartel in its prime, reportedly earned as much as $70 million a day. This financial power enables them to build infrastructure, bribe officials, launder money through elaborate networks of front businesses and cryptocurrencies, and acquire cutting-edge technology. In many cases, their budgets rival or exceed those of the very law enforcement agencies tasked with dismantling them. Armament is one of the cartel's most significant investments. The range of arms in their possession extends far beyond conventional firearms and includes some of the most lethal, high-grade equipment found on global battlefields. Cartels commonly stockpile automatic rifles such as AK-47s, M16s, and AR-15s, many of which are trafficked across the US-Mexico border. These weapons are not only widely available on the black market, but are frequently modified after acquisition. Mexican security forces have previously reported seizing thousands of altered rifles in a single year. For instance, in 2009 alone, authorities confiscated over 4,400 modified AK-47 and AR-15 variants, many of which had been illegally converted to allow automatic fire. These seizures offer only a glimpse into a much broader inventory still circulating among cartel groups. However, it is the more advanced and far-reaching weapons that pose the gravest concern, particularly when viewed through the lens of international security. The presence of anti-tank and anti-aircraft systems among cartel stockpiles marks a dramatic escalation in their threat level. Reports have surfaced of cartels, such as the infamous Sinaloa organization, acquiring FGM-148 Javelin missile systems, shoulder-launched guided weapons capable of disabling armored vehicles from more than 2 miles away. These missiles use a tandem warhead system designed to penetrate advanced armor plating and have demonstrated exceptional accuracy, with a reported success rate of 94% in combat conditions. Even more alarming is the fact that some cartel members appear to have received proper training in the operation of these weapons. In interviews, individuals affiliated with cartel groups have admitted not only to possessing javelins, but also to understanding how to deploy them effectively. This suggests access not merely to hardware, but also technical knowledge, raising questions about where such training was obtained and whether more sophisticated instruction networks are in play. In recent years, Mexican cartels have shot at military helicopters. In 2015, a drug cartel in Jalisco used a rocket launcher to take down an army helicopter. The helicopter was transporting soldiers and equipment when it was hit. The crash killed several people. This attack showed just how bold and dangerous cartels can be when they have heavy weapons. In Colombia, during the decades-long war with drug lords and rebels, planes and helicopters were often targeted. Groups like the FARC used stolen or homemade weapons to shoot at police aircraft. These were not high-tech planes, but they were important to the country's fight against crime. This made them targets. The origin of these weapons is difficult to trace. The U.S. Department of Defense, for example, lost track of dozens of Javelin systems during the Iraq conflict, and some may have filtered into criminal hands through third-party trafficking or black market sales. Beyond Javelins, authorities in Mexico have previously intercepted shipments containing Stinger missiles and AT-4 anti-tank launchers, both of which are capable of engaging aircraft and armored ground targets, respectively. Aside from individual weapons, some cartels have constructed improvised armored vehicles, so-called narco tanks, or monsters, engineered to break through police barricades and endure gunfire. Surveillance drones are increasingly used for reconnaissance and, in some instances, to deliver small explosives. Their smuggling networks are equally advanced, employing submarines, fast boats, and private aircraft to transport contraband across international borders with astonishing success. Personnel is another pillar of their strength. Cartels frequently recruit former soldiers, elite police officers, and special forces operatives. These individuals bring professional-grade tactical knowledge and combat skills, enabling the organizations to conduct sophisticated operations, rivaling those of state militaries. Given such vast resources, it's theoretically possible that a well-funded cartel could attempt to target a high-value military asset like the US B-2 Spirit bomber. In terms of raw capital, they could afford to acquire black market missile systems, radar tracking tools, or even external technical support to help identify and attack airborne targets. Yet the feasibility of such an operation collapses when considering the complexity of targeting a B-2. This aircraft was specifically engineered to evade detection, using advanced stealth technology that makes it nearly invisible to conventional radar systems. Most cartels, even those with immense wealth, do not possess the specialized tracking systems or trained technicians necessary to lock onto such a target. Even many national militaries struggle to detect the B-2 at cruising altitude, roughly 50,000 feet. Furthermore, the limited range of most black market missile systems makes high-altitude interception virtually impossible. Man-pads, for example, are designed to strike helicopters or low-flying planes and lack the propulsion to reach aircraft flying at such extreme elevations. Without advanced radar and guided missile systems capable of reaching those heights, any launch attempt would be blind and ineffective. Even under ideal conditions, if a B-2 were flying low during a bombing run, taking off or landing, cartels would still face monumental challenges. Spotting the aircraft in time, coordinating a precise strike, and overcoming its suite of defensive countermeasures, including flares and electronic jamming, would require elite training and near-perfect execution. In addition, B-2 missions are often accompanied by support from drones, satellites, and fighter escorts. But perhaps the most significant deterrent isn't technical, it's geopolitical. Successfully downing a U.S. stealth bomber would constitute an act of war. The retaliation from the United States would be immediate and devastating. The cartel responsible would face not just national police or army units, but the full force of American military power, with no hesitation and no room for negotiation. However, the cartels are not new to war against the government. For nearly 2 decades, Mexico has been embroiled in a relentless conflict against powerful drug cartels, a war that continues to claim lives without delivering a decisive victory. Despite extensive efforts by Mexican authorities and billions in U.S. support, the violence remains staggering. Since the government formally declared war on the cartels in 2006, the country has suffered over 460,000 homicides, a figure that underscores the scale and brutality of the crisis. In the early stages of the conflict, former President Felipe Calderón took a militarized approach. Tens of thousands of soldiers were deployed across the nation to reinforce or replace local police forces. This surge initially yielded results. 25 of the country's 37 most wanted drug lords were captured or killed. But the strategy had unintended consequences. Rather than dismantling cartel power, it splintered the criminal landscape. Smaller, more elusive and violent gangs quickly filled the vacuum, escalating the brutality and making it harder for authorities to track and neutralize them. Subsequent administrations shifted their focus from confronting cartels directly to managing the country's soaring murder rate. This change in strategy allowed many of the fractured criminal factions to thrive in the shadows, relying on agility, anonymity, and ruthless violence to maintain control. While Mexico's military, despite its size, struggles against well-armed and deeply embedded enemies, the United States presents an entirely different kind of force. Should the U.S. ever commit to a direct campaign against the cartels, the balance of power would shift dramatically. The United States possesses one of the most formidable military forces in the world, both in manpower and technology. With approximately 1.3 million active-duty personnel and nearly 800,000 reservists, the American military stands ready to respond to threats across the globe. In a full-scale mobilization, millions more could be drafted, though such a step would be unnecessary when confronting criminal networks like the Mexican cartels. Its arsenal matches its size. The U.S. military holds over 4,600 main battle tanks, nearly 400,000 ground vehicles for combat and transport, 641 multiple launch rocket systems, and close to 2,000 artillery pieces. Ground forces are equipped with modern weapons, including large numbers of M4 carbines and Javelin missile systems, standard tools that give individual soldiers a significant edge in combat. Despite this overwhelming superiority, engaging the cartels presents a unique set of complications. Unlike conventional armies, cartel forces do not operate from fixed military bases. Their operations are embedded in civilian areas, small towns and city neighborhoods, where they exploit the population as both camouflage and shield. This makes direct attacks complex, as American troops must avoid unnecessary civilian harm while dismantling criminal networks. To navigate this terrain, the U.S. would likely adopt a strategy based on isolation and precision. Rather than launching broad offensives, American forces would surround cartel-held territories with armored convoys, establishing secure checkpoints to cut off all movement in and out. Only after a complete lockdown would ground teams advance, relying on real-time intelligence to target specific cartel facilities. In these urban environments, U.S. soldiers would function more like specialized counter-terror units than traditional infantry. Their movements would be careful and deliberate, aimed at dismantling infrastructure without triggering indiscriminate destruction. Resistance, however, would be expected. Armed with smuggled heavy weapons, including reports of javelin missiles, cartel fighters could attempt ambushes and sabotage, using their familiarity with the terrain to create short-term tactical challenges. Still, in any prolonged conflict, the balance would tip overwhelmingly in favor of the U.S. military. Its superior coordination, firepower, and intelligence infrastructure far outpace anything the cartels can mount. That intelligence advantage is already visible. In early 2025, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft conducted at least 18 specialized flights along the Mexican border, far more than the one-per-month frequency seen in earlier years. These spy planes, operating with Mexico's full cooperation, now scan the skies constantly, mapping cartel supply lines, identifying secret airstrips, and tracking vehicle movements from above. Even without full-scale deployment, the U.S. has already demonstrated dominance in the air and sea. Major cartel positions have been struck, maritime blockades are in place, and American aircraft patrol Mexican airspace with precision. But while the campaign has proven effective, the cartels are far from broken. Over time, these criminal organizations have evolved from loosely organized smuggling rings into militarized factions. Many operate training camps where recruits learn guerrilla tactics, urban combat techniques, and the use of improvised explosives. Their fighters, often clad in military-style gear, are capable of launching surprise attacks, setting traps, and vanishing into the civilian population. This ability to hide in plain sight gives them an edge in asymmetrical warfare. Blending into local communities, they can carry out attacks while intimidating civilians into silence. Fear, corruption, and control form the pillars of their local power. Yet the cartels suffer from a critical weakness: fragmentation. Rather than a unified enemy, Mexico hosts a volatile mix of rival groups, including the Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Los Zetas, and others, each vying for dominance. As American strikes intensify, these factions would likely begin to turn on each other, competing for resources and territory. Internal discord would further weaken their ability to mount any coordinated resistance. This disunity also creates a valuable opening for U.S. intelligence agencies. Surveillance tools, including satellites, drones, and signal intercepts, can monitor cartel movements, intercept communications, and trace heat signatures. Once the group responsible for downing the B-2 bomber is identified, the response will be swift and absolute. Precision airstrikes would likely follow, targeting cartel safe houses, weapons caches, drug labs, and leadership compounds. Afterwards, elite special operations forces might be deployed to eliminate or capture high-value targets. These units operate quietly, often under the cover of night, and rely on continuous intelligence support from air and space assets. But the response would not stop at the battlefield. Economically, the U.S. would suffocate the cartel's financial system. Bank accounts, front businesses, and even digital assets such as cryptocurrency wallets would be frozen or seized. International cooperation would ensure that the cartel's ability to move funds, buy weapons, or pay off officials would be severely restricted. Without money, their capacity to recruit, equip, and wage war would collapse. Cutting off the drug trade would remain a core objective. Intelligence indicates that the majority of cocaine entering the U.S. is produced in Colombia and smuggled north through Mexico. To disrupt this, the U.S. Navy may expand its presence in the South Pacific, intercepting ocean-bound shipments. Land-based checkpoints at Central American borders, especially near Nicaragua, would help sever overland routes. The strategy is simple: isolate the cartels, dry up their revenue, and eliminate their influence. Any cartel bold enough to strike at a strategic American asset like a B-2 bomber would not face measured retaliation. They would face complete disintegration. Have you ever wondered what happens when militants take on the wrong target? Picture two MH-60R Seahawks slicing through dawn over the southern Red Sea, while the Maersk Hangzhou steams below, blissfully unaware of Houthi fast attack boats closing in with RPGs and PKMs. The ship's few security contractors scan the horizon, fingers tight on triggers. Every second counts. Ready today to see what unfolds when cutting-edge helicopters meet heavily armed militants? Let's dive into a truly real showdown where split-second decisions and raw firepower spell the difference between sinking and surviving. Nothing about that morning felt routine. At exactly 6:30 a.m. local time, two U.S. Navy MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, call signs Lancer 71 from USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and Lancer 72 from USS Gravely, were hovering just above the surface of the southern Red Sea. Their mission was simple in description, but critical in intent: provide top cover for a naval task force patrolling those waters. For months, Houthi attacks had been on the rise in the same area, making global trade nervous and shipping costs climb. Ships had been rerouting, waiting on slow convoys and watching every radar screen as they passed near Yemen. These MH-60R Seahawks aren't ordinary choppers. Since 2010, they've served as the U.S. Navy's primary helicopters for hunting submarines and watching surface ships. They replaced older SH-60B and SH-60F aircraft and quickly proved their worth by flying more often and staying ready longer than any other maritime helicopter. They carry advanced radars, sonar systems, and a mix of weapons, enough to handle threats from under the waves to above deck. On this morning, though, the patrol had been quiet. The pilots scanned the horizon, looking for anything suspicious, but so far the seas and the sky had given no hints of trouble. Below them, about 55 nautical miles southwest of Al Hudaydah, Yemen, the Singapore-flagged container ship Maersk Hangzhou steamed toward its next port, carrying dozens of containers stacked high on its deck. It was a familiar sight in these trade routes, part of the flow that sends goods across the world. But that day, the Hangzhou had a layer of extra protection. Security contractors from Trident Group stood watch on deck, ready to deal with any unwanted visitors. With Houthi forces in the area launching fast attack boats, firing rockets, and disrupting shipping lanes, a team of trained guards was something no captain wanted to sail without. As the sun rose, its light turned the gentle ripples of the Red Sea golden. From their vantage point a few hundred feet up, the Seahawk crews could see another ship or two on the horizon and the occasional fishing boat, but nothing that screamed danger. Meanwhile, the Maersk Hangzhou's crew went through their routine checks: engines, deck lines, and cargo latches, making sure everything was secure for the day ahead. The Trident contractors, wearing their distinctive gear, scanned the water for any fast boats that might slip in close. Their drill was well rehearsed. If small craft crept too near, they would sound alarms, lock down key areas, and hold their positions until they could see if the boats were friendly or hostile. Unknown to the Seahawk pilots, a formation of Houthi fast attack boats was moving quietly from the coast near Hodeidah. The Houthi group uses fast boats called the Tufan series, often to shake up shipping and keep larger ships on edge. These machines can sneak close without risking a crew and add another layer of worry for anyone sailing through the region. Their plan was straightforward: surge forward, close in on the Maersk Hangzhou, and try to board before the crew could react. If successful, they would seize control of the ship's deck and cargo. But the attackers did not know that Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 were patrolling overhead, or that their sensors were on high alert for exactly this kind of move. Back on Maersk Hangzhou, the Trident security contractors had orders to stay extra vigilant. They watched the water surface with binoculars and listened to every radio call. When anything moved faster than a fishing skiff or cast a shadow too large for a local show, they were trained to report it immediately. Under that early morning light, the breakers of the Red Sea hid many things. Shadows could be dolphins, dark shapes might be drifting debris, But these contractors knew to trust their instincts. If the boat slipped past 6 nautical miles out, alarms would sound, and the crew would lock down key areas of the ship. By the time the Houthi boats closed in to 6 nautical miles, the Maersk Hangzhou's alarm bells rang out. The Trident guards moved to their defensive positions, some behind steel barriers near the deckhouse, others checking that fire hoses were ready if needed. They called into radios, trying to warn off any approaching craft and alert any friendly forces nearby. Above them, Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 were still circling, their crews scanning radar scopes for the same signs of trouble. Neither the Seahawk pilots nor the ship's crew knew how quickly events could unfold once hostiles drew near. But at that moment, both sets of eyes, those in the cockpits and those on the vessel's deck, were locked on the same target area, and everyone was poised, ready to respond the instant they saw the next move. Everything hinged on a few seconds and the weapons each side had. On Maersk Hangzhou, the security team had nothing more than M4 rifles and an M240 machine gun. Against that, the Houthi boats were packing rockets, RPGs with thermobaric warheads, and belt-fed PKM machine guns, all weapons that shoot farther, hit harder, and rip through thin metal hulls like paper. In the quiet before the storm, both sides knew an intense fight was coming, but neither could fully predict how fast it would all unfold. Within minutes, those small, fast boats would close the gap and press themselves right up against the merchant ship's hull. The Hangzhou's defenses, just a handful of rifles and a single heavy machine gun, were simply outclassed. Meanwhile, high above the waves, the 2 Seahawk helicopters listened for a distress call from below. The moment that call crackled through their radios, both choppers sprang to life. In fixed-wing terms, they needed to close a 26 nautical mile gap, which at full tilt, 160 knots, would still take about 9 minutes. But by then, the Houthis would already be climbing over the side. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. At exactly 6:31 a.m., the MH-60Rs, call signs Lancer 71 and Lancer 72, picked up suspicious contacts on their radar. 4 Iranian-supplied, Boghammer-style fast attack boats were converging on Maersk Hangzhou. Each one measured 7 to 10 meters long, sleek and low to the water, built for speed rather than comfort. Traveling at roughly 50 knots apiece, they raced in a tight, converging formation, like wolves closing in on a wounded deer. Their crews, 3 to 4 Houthi militants per boat, carried PKM machine guns, AK-47 rifles, and RPGs. 2 of those RPG teams had thermobaric Taba-14 warheads, the kind of weapon that can blast through 300 millimeters of rolled armor. For a container ship with a hull barely 25 millimeters thick, that meant a direct hit could punch a hole the size of a watermelon without breaking a sweat. Even more unsettling, each Houthi boat was rigged with a Starlink terminal. With that setup, they weren't operating blind. Real-time data streamed back and forth between the boats, overhead drones, coastal spotters, and command posts in Hodeidah. If one fast boat pilot spotted something on the water, he'd share it instantly with the rest. That level of coordination, feeding live imagery and position reports into a shared network, meant these attacks weren't random or desperate raids. They were carefully planned strikes, following what Iranian naval experts call asymmetric doctrine. Put simply, the Houthis were using cheap, fast platforms and smart communications to overwhelm a bigger target. Trident Group security contractors on Maersk Hangzhou braced by the stern and port side as 4 Houthi fast attack boats approached. At several kilometers out, they fired M240B machine guns, hitting one of Boghammer's hulls and spraying water. Only one staggered. The others closed in, engines roaring, guns ready. The boats covered the final 1,200 meters in seconds, reaching 600 meters inside RPG range, spiking tension. Any RPG or thermobaric rocket could punch a hull hole or spark a deck explosion, risking a boarding. The Seahawks were 9 minutes away. The ship's defense relied on shouted commands, precise M240 fire, and the attackers' fragile boats. In that moment, 6:31 and 47 seconds into the morning, the distance was almost gone. The attackers' shift from 1,800 meters to 600 meters had taken less time than it takes to count one Mississippi. The next move would be the most dangerous. When the Houthi boats slipped under the boom of the Hangzhou's deck and tried to climb aboard. At that sliver of time, everyone involved knew the outcome would set the stage for what came next. Either a close-quarters fight on deck or the arrival of U.S. Navy Hawks just in time. But as the boats closed, the divide between success and failure was measured in mere feet, and those few seconds could decide it all. That morning, everything boiled down to a few critical moments. On Maersk Hangzhou's deck, the security team's suppressive fire managed to smash one of the attacker's rudder assemblies, sending one Boghammer skiff veering off course. But the larger threat was still barreling toward them. The RPG gunner on Boat 2 pulled the trigger and sent a thermobaric warhead screaming in their direction. It zipped past, coming within a hair's breadth, just 3 meters, of the ship's superstructure, the bridge area that sticks up above the main deck, where the captain and crew steer in coordinate defenses. If that shot had landed, the Hangzhou would have lost its ability to maneuver or call for help, leaving it a sitting duck. At that moment, the trenches of sand or the stacked crates on deck weren't going to hold back the Houthi militants for much longer. The security detail was on the brink of being overrun, and that's when the Seahawks finally appeared. The M60R helicopters, Lancer 71 and Lancer 72, answered the distress call as quickly as physics would allow. But they weren't teleporters. From their patrol orbit, they were still 26 nautical miles away. Even pushing their turbine engines to scream at 160 knots, it would take roughly 9 minutes to reach the Hangzhou. And those 9 minutes felt like an eternity when you're staring down attackers armed with rocket-propelled grenades. When the trapped security team on deck staved off the skiffs just long enough, the Boghammers were forced to pause at around 600 meters out. They wanted to plaster the ship with RPG fire before making their boarding attempt. That brief lull proved to be precisely the opening the Seahawks needed. By 6:39 a.m., just 8 minutes after the first shots, both helicopters had closed the distance to just a mile. With their rotors whipping the salty air, Lancer 71 and 72 were in position. But having helicopters overhead doesn't automatically mean a quick zap and a tidy finish. The pilots still had to figure out which boats to hit first. Hidden beneath the nose of each Seahawk helicopter is the AN/APS 153-V radar system, a remarkable piece of technology. Designed to scan the sea surface and detect tiny contacts, this radar sends out radio waves that bounce back from ships, submarines, and small boats. Its precision allows pilots and crew to spot objects in the water from miles away, day or night, in weather or through fog and rain. The information it gathers is displayed on screens inside the aircraft, guiding decision-makers to track moving targets or search for potential threats. Thanks to this radar, the Seahawks can carry out reconnaissance and safety missions with confidence. From nearly 42 kilometers away, it first picked up the 4 Iranian-supplied Boghammer-style boats. But the Red Sea's choppy waters throw up plenty of sea clutter, random reflections off waves that look like legitimate contacts. To sort real threats from the foam, the radar needed a better look. Initially, the radar was painting a chaotic picture, tracking 32 separate contacts, from fishing dhows to drifting debris. To cut through the noise, pilots switched to narrow pulse mode, sending half to 1 microsecond bursts for tracking precise location, speed, and size data. Like zooming in to avoid background blur, this helped Seahawks lock onto 4 attack boats. But narrow pulses alone couldn't deliver pinpoint targeting, so they activated the Moving Target Indicator, MTI, which uses the Doppler effect. When radar waves bounce off a moving vessel, the frequency shifts, like a motorcycle's engine pitch, rising and falling as it passes. Measuring these shifts lets radar distinguish a real boat from a wave. With MTI humming, pilots suddenly saw each Boghammer's true speed, heading, and size. No more guessing. The formidable fast attack crafts appeared in razor-sharp focus, engines churning the sea as they steamed toward Maersk Hangzhou's flanks, closing in rapidly and dangerously. At 1 mile out, the Seahawks held their positions overhead, circling like guardian angels. Their arrival shifted the balance. For now, the Houthi skiffs had to think twice before swarming the deck. But as those 4 boats roared beneath, their crews still gripped RPGs and PKMs. They could feel the weight of 2 rotary wing jets ready to rain down fire if needed. In those tense seconds, with the radar feeding data into their consoles and the MTI isolating targets from the waves, the Seahawk pilots prepared to make the first move. Their mission: protect the unarmed container ship and its security team from being overwhelmed. And that is where this extract leaves off, with two Seahawk helicopters hovering above, sensors locked on hostile boats closing in, and the next decisive moments hanging in the balance. By the time the helicopters closed in, the pilots had already used the radar's moving target indicator to pick out which blips on the screen were actual boats, not just waves. But once MTI confirmed something solid was moving, they switched to inverse synthetic aperture radar, or ISAR. Think of ISAR as a high-tech camera that figures out a precise picture of whatever it locks onto, using those same Doppler shifts that tip them off to movement. In practice, this meant the pilots could see real-time detailed images of the fast attack boats, their size, shape, and even some markings on the hull. No more guessing which targets were the attackers. Now they had visual confirmation that the Houthi boats were dead ahead. And with that, it was go time. Each Seahawk was ready for exactly this kind of fight. Under each side door sat a GAU 21.50 caliber machine gun, often called 50s in military lingo, called crew served because they needed both a pilot to fly and a door gunner to pull the trigger. These guns could spit out up to 1,100 rounds every single minute, with bullets reaching out nearly 2,000 meters. The ammo load was a mix of armor-piercing incendiary rounds, which could punch through metal and start fires, and tracer rounds, which left a little streak of light so the door gunners could see exactly where their shots were going. All told, the Seahawks had enough firepower to shred the thin-skinned Boghammer boats from well above the waterline. But the Houthis had one more card to play, and they played it at 6:40 a.m. As the helicopters drifted into position, 4 PKM machine guns on the lead Houthi boat opened up. The tracers snapped in the serious early morning light, with rounds zipping past within just 15 meters of the Seahawks' rotors. That's close. So close that the chaos of bullets could have easily shredded rotors or punched into a fuel tank. In the Houthis' minds, getting in the first shots might have knocked a Seahawk out of the sky. Instead, it turned out to be their last mistake. Without hesitation, both helicopters dropped lower down to about 150 feet off the water, tightening the distance so their own guns could get the most accurate angle. At the same time, knowing how quickly things can go south, each Seahawk sprayed countermeasures behind them. They released a dozen bright-burning MJU-68B flares, each one blasting up to 2,200 degrees Celsius and burning for nearly 2.5 seconds. Alongside the flares, they dropped 24 bundles of RR-180 chaff, which scattered into a kind of silver cloud to confuse any radar-guided missile. No one saw a missile trace, so it turned out these extra precautions weren't needed. But in a situation like this, you don't wait to find out if the bad guys have a shoulder-fired heat seeker. You assume they might. And then all hell broke loose in earnest. Exactly 1 minute after the Houthis' first salvo, at 6:41, Lancer 71's door gunner picked out Boat 1 as the highest threat, a small craft roaring forward with a fresh set of PKMs and an RPG launcher aimed at the ship below. The Seahawk pilot held steady, giving the gunner a stable platform. 3 bursts of .50 caliber bullets came screaming out, each round a potential game changer. The first 2 streams of fire rattled across the bow, but the third was a direct hit, slamming right into the engine block. For those who know anything about boat engines, that's the critical hit. Destroy the motor, and the craft can't maneuver or flee. But here's what really made sparks fly. The slug that struck didn't just stop the engine, it ruptured the fuel cell. In an instant, a fireball erupted so bright the pilots could see it from their cockpit, and debris from the burning hull shot into the air. Within 45 seconds of that first burst, Boat 1 was no more than a smoldering wreck. As the flames spread, it took on water and sank beneath the waves, leaving nothing but smoke in a trembling wake. For the crew on Maersk Hangzhou below, the sound of that explosion and the sight of boat debris trailing off was the clearest promise that help had arrived. The other 3 Boghamars, momentarily stunned by Boat 1's destruction, wavered in their advance. For a brief, crucial moment, the Hangzhou's security team could breathe a little easier, and the Seahawks had proven their might. At that exact point, the fight was far from over, but Boat 1's sinking marked a turning point. It was the first domino to fall in what would become a decisive defense of a merchant ship under siege. Before the first boghammer even finished sliding beneath the waves, Lancer 71 banked hard to the left and locked onto Boat 2. Imagine a helicopter suddenly tipping, its nose pointing toward a small craft speeding across choppy water. That's exactly what the pilot did. The door gunner let loose a quick burst of 50 caliber rounds that blew out the rudder. Without steering, the little skiff started veering wildly, like a go-kart with a busted wheel. The gunner didn't let up. He poured in a solid 3-second spray of armor-piercing incendiary rounds into the already crippled boat. Within moments, Boat 2 listed violently, water gushed in through the shattered hull, and by 6:42 a.m., it rolled over and capsized, disappearing into the depths. With 2 helicopters circling overhead, the pilots didn't waste a second. They shifted their sights to Boat 3. This time, both Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 trained their guns together on a single target. The twin streams of tracers looked almost poetic, like synchronized swimmers cutting through the water, but made of bullets. In just a few heartbeats, dozens of armor-piercing shells hammered into Boat 3's underside, punching holes below its waterline. The crew on that skiff realized they were done for. Water flooded in faster than their frantic attempts to bail it out. By 6:44 a.m., Boat 3 gave a final lurch and sank, leaving only a swirl of oily foam where it had been. Boat 4, seeing 3 of its comrades sent to Davy Jones's locker, decided discretion was the better part of valor. Instead of charging in, it spun around and booked it back out to sea. Smoke trailed from its damaged engine as it limped northwest, trying to put distance between itself and the Seahawk helicopters. Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 could have chased it, but their orders were clear. Stay with the merchant ship. With Boat 4 racing away, the helicopters hovered above the Maersk Hangzhou, their guns still hot but their focus returning to protecting the vessel. In just under 7 minutes, from the first crash of bullets to the last sinking hull, the 2 Seahawks had sent 3 Boghamar boats to the bottom. Between them, they'd fired roughly 1,800 rounds of ammunition, each designed to rip through metal while keeping as much distance from their own rotors as possible. But for the U.S. military brass, this was only the start of their message. Sinking a few boats in self-defense was one thing. They wanted to make it painfully clear that attacking U.S. escorts would carry far greater costs. Within 8 hours of that morning's skirmish, the guided missile destroyer USS Gravely steamed close to the Yemeni coast. Its target, a handful of coastal radar stations the Houthis had been using to give data to their fast attack boats. Those sites at Jabal al-Tayr, al-Mocha, and Ras Isa had been eyes in the sky, telling Houthi skippers where U.S. ships were, what courses they took, and when they might slip into danger. Starting later that afternoon, Gravely's 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4 naval gun swung into action. Each round weighed about 70 pounds, packed with high explosives or airburst charges, flying at roughly 2,600 feet per second up to 9 miles out. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Gravely moved up and down the coast with relative ease. At each radar installation, it unleashed a barrage, blast after blast, until 3 entire sites lay in ruins. Post-strike drone assessments showed that those hits degraded Houthi maritime surveillance by at least 60%. That meant those fast boats would now have to rely on less accurate spotting methods, like someone on shore peering through binoculars rather than satellite-linked radars. With those coastal eyes taken out, the Houthis lost the tactical edge that had made their swarm tactics so deadly. But U.S. retaliation didn't stop at taking out radars. New Year's Day brought another round of strikes. On January 1st, just after sunset, 4 FA-18E Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 131 took off from USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Each jet carried 2 AGM-154C Joint Standoff Weapons, JSOWs, smart glide bombs designed to blast through reinforced concrete. Each JSOWC had a 500-pound Broach warhead, which on impact unleashed a molten metal jet capable of carving through 3.7 meters of solid concrete like warm butter. At 6:43 p.m. local time, those 4 missiles struck the Al-Durahimi missile warehouse. One by one, explosions rocked the compound as secondary blasts erupted from the stacks of rockets and missiles inside. Intercepts of Houthi radio chatter afterward confirmed what everyone expected. 18 Qasef drones were destroyed on the ground before ever lifting off, along with 4 Noor anti-ship missiles and multiple missile guidance kits. Critically, 2 Iranian advisors who were there to assist and 12 Houthi operators lost their lives in the blast. That final strike sent a loud and clear message. The U.S. response to Houthi aggression wouldn't end once the helicopters went home and the Bot-4 skiff had slipped away. From shutting down radar sites to wiping out drone production and missile stocks, the Americans were determined to remove the Houthis' ability to launch future attacks. If you attacked a U.S.-escorted ship, you wouldn't just face immediate defense, you'd feel the consequences days later when bombs and rounds rained on your assets long after the smoke cleared.
The United States Navy is reaching its limit. After years of relentless cartel activity, smuggling routes, brutal violence, and a crumbling border situation, America is now responding with a force unlike anything seen before. Warships, stealth aircraft, and advanced drones are sweeping across the southern frontier with a message loud and clear. This is our line. Don't cross it. This isn't a bluff. It marks the beginning of a military campaign that could reshape the cartel war forever. The only question is, can the cartels survive what's coming? Here's how the U.S. Navy is cracking down on cartel operations at the border. Back in March, President Donald Trump officially declared 8 major cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That move gave the U.S. military, especially the Navy, sweeping counterterrorism authority. Around the same time, Mexico's Senate agreed to a joint training initiative between America's 7th Special Forces Group and Mexico's elite naval marine units. But in truth, these moves were just the surface. Trump had already begun quietly mobilizing military assets on January 20th, the very day he was sworn in for a second term. The public announcements came later. The operations were already underway. Since then, both U.S. and Mexican officials have acknowledged at least 18 aerial surveillance missions over Mexican territory. Among the aircraft used, one in particular has drawn global attention: the MQ-9 Reaper drone. This is no ordinary surveillance tool. It's the U.S. military's primary drone for intelligence gathering and pinpoint strikes. It can carry 8 Hellfire missiles, including the notorious Ninja Bomb, which doesn't explode but slices through its target with whirling blades. The Reaper name fits for a reason. The drone can fly over 1,100 miles and remain airborne for up to 40 hours without landing. Onboard systems include high-resolution infrared sensors, real-time video feeds, and a state-of-the-art targeting module known as the AN/DAS-4MTSB, capable of spotting a person from 30,000 feet or reading license plates from far beyond the horizon. Due to its effectiveness, the CIA has even loaned Reapers to the DEA for counter-cartel operations. This interagency cooperation, originally developed under President Biden, focuses on locating hidden drug facilities buried deep in rural Mexico. Yet once Trump took office again, the mission accelerated. Drone activity increased, and a full-scale military deployment followed. Within days of Trump's return, the southern border saw a military surge. By the end of March, over 2,000 troops were assigned to border operations. Among them, more than 140 intelligence specialists from agencies like the CIA and NSA. The Navy and Border Patrol had been fighting hard already, but the cartels stayed one step ahead by diving beneath the surface, literally. Submersibles, once considered too advanced for criminal groups, became a new frontier for smuggling. These aren't military-grade submarines. Early versions from the 90s were handmade with plywood and fiberglass in dense, swampy terrain where satellites couldn't detect them. But today's narco subs are built by skilled engineers. Modern versions stretch up to 80 feet long, can travel over 2,500 miles, and cost upwards of $2 million to construct. Crewed by 5 men, each one can haul 10 tons of cocaine, worth about $150 million. Their design makes them incredibly hard to track. Painted in flat blues and grays to blend with ocean waves, they leave almost no wake. Some are even lined with lead panels to absorb heat, making them invisible to thermal imaging. If spotted, the crews have a contingency. A single valve can flood and sink the vessel in minutes, along with all its cargo, leaving no evidence behind. But submarines aren't the cartel's only high-tech tool. Their other weapon? Speed. Enter the go-fast boats, small but deadly. Around 30 feet in length, most are powered by 3 or 4 high-performance engines and can hit speeds over 80 miles per hour. They're built for agility and stealth, hugging the waterline painted to match the sea, and often operated by a single smuggler to maximize space for drugs and fuel. With as much as 2,000 gallons of fuel on board, they can cover over 500 miles, enough to go from Colombia to Jamaica or from the Bahamas to Florida. Now, cartels have gone further, developing hybrids. These low-profile vessels blend the traits of go-fasts and submarines. They cruise just above the waterline, are nearly invisible to radar, and move at slower speeds, about 30 miles per hour. Constructed with radar-absorbing materials, they're the ultimate stealth craft. With subs lurking in the deep and low-slung boats skimming the waves, cartel smuggling has become a game of shadows. Shipments can appear from anywhere, at any time. But there's one ship that's turned that chaos into fear: the USCGC James. In 2025, this Coast Guard cutter has become a legend. During a grueling 112-day patrol, it captured so much cartel cargo that some traffickers won't even speak its name aloud. The James is a 418-foot maritime fortress operated by 150 elite crew members trained in high-speed pursuits and at-sea interdictions. In one mission near Ecuador, it deployed a drone with an 18-hour flight window and ultra-clear cameras to track a suspicious vessel. The result? 3 smugglers arrested and over 2,200 pounds of cocaine confiscated. The day after that bust, surveillance spotted an even bolder move: 3 go-fast boats running together. It's a risky tactic, rarely seen. U.S. forces launched helicopters and intercepted all 3 simultaneously. 9 more traffickers were taken into custody and another 14,000 pounds of cocaine seized. Cartels responded by switching to radar-evading boats. But once again, the cutter James was ready. A helicopter swooped in, disabled the engines mid-run, and apprehended the crew, along with over 8,000 pounds of drugs. In another chase, smugglers began tossing bales of cocaine into the sea to outrun the Navy. But fast response teams retrieved both the drugs and the culprits, salvaging 6,000 pounds of narcotics from the ocean. In 4 months, the James removed over 48,000 pounds of illegal substances, worth more than $920 million, from cartel hands, enough to cripple trafficking routes for months. Other Navy ships, such as the USS Minneapolis-St. Paul and USS St. Louis, have joined the mission in the Caribbean, helping dismantle the smuggling networks of groups like Sinaloa and CJNG, Jalisco New Generation. To reinforce the effort, the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with Tomahawk missiles, was deployed to waters near the Texas-Mexico border, not for show, but for action. It's now coordinating with Border Patrol and Coast Guard units both in U.S. territory and just beyond. And it's not just happening at sea. President Trump is pushing hard to fulfill his long-promised border wall revival. New sections rise 30 feet into the sky, built with steel bollards and fitted with features to prevent climbing. But that's just the surface. Every panel is wired with motion sensors and high-definition surveillance cameras. The moment movement is detected, alerts go out, and the Air National Guard responds. Since Border Patrol agents must be boots on the ground, the National Guard fills the surveillance gap. Upon alert, drones are launched to scout the terrain. If someone is spotted, law enforcement is dispatched within minutes. This shift has made smuggling far more difficult. Under Biden, Border Patrol caught over 7,100 people per day. Under Trump, that number has dropped to about 1,000 daily, a staggering difference. And this is just the beginning. Every branch of the U.S. military is now part of this fight. They've brought in surveillance platforms, fast response units, and drone warfare on a scale never seen in the war on drugs. One surprising comeback? The legendary U-2 spy plane. Despite its age, it remains one of the most powerful aerial intelligence tools ever built. Flying at 70,000 feet, it can capture crystal-clear images from over 300 miles away and map hidden cartel bases, even through dense jungle canopy or mountain ranges. Together with MQ-9 Reapers, U-2s are scanning Mexico's terrain day and night, identifying targets that were once invisible. The message is clear: the United States is no longer waiting. Every eye in the sky, every ship at sea, and every boot on the ground is aimed at one goal: dismantling the cartels once and for all. The battle lines are drawn, the storm is here, and for the cartels, escape is no longer an option. The U.S. Navy is stepping up its game in a big way. Among the latest assets deployed is the P-8 Poseidon, a cutting-edge surveillance aircraft originally engineered to track enemy submarines and warships. Today, it's soaring over the Baja Peninsula, monitoring the Pacific coastline for cartel maritime activity. Its advanced sonar and radar systems are crucial for intercepting drug shipments, especially those aimed at slipping into California. Meanwhile, one of America's most powerful intelligence aircraft, the RC-135 Rivet Joint, has been spotted flying over cartel-controlled zones. Outfitted with sophisticated signal interception gear, this plane can pick up everything, from cell phone chatter and radio frequencies to encrypted communications used by top-level cartel operatives. Every time a trafficker makes a call, sends a signal, or radios a message, the Rivet Joint locks in on it, zeroing in on their exact location. After being seen near Culiacan, a notorious cartel stronghold, it became clear the U.S. Air Force is gathering intel straight from the top of the cartel hierarchy. But what Washington plans to do with that intel is where things take a serious turn. Talks of taking direct military action against cartel networks have floated around for years. But now, it's more than talk. It's nearing reality. According to multiple current and former military, intelligence, and law enforcement sources, President Trump is seriously weighing targeted airstrikes. The plan on the table hit cartel leaders, drug labs, transport hubs, and storage facilities using drones and bombers deep inside Mexican territory. Quiet meetings between Pentagon brass, White House officials, and intelligence chiefs are already underway. And while Mexican authorities have been briefed, cooperation isn't guaranteed. Behind closed doors, there's already chatter that if diplomacy stalls, the U.S. might go solo, launching covert strikes without formal permission from Mexico's government. If that happens, it could mark one of the largest U.S. military actions on foreign land since the early 2000s war on terror. The scope of the proposed mission, the personnel, aircraft, and firepower involved, would dwarf anything the cartels have faced before. When asked about the reports, the National Security Council remained tight-lipped, a silence that only fuels speculation. At the same time, Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has pushed back hard against any idea of unauthorized military involvement. While acknowledging collaboration with U.S. forces, she's made it clear any unsanctioned action would be seen as a breach of sovereignty. That hasn't stopped Ronald Johnson, Trump's pick for U.S. ambassador to Mexico, from endorsing unilateral action if it comes to that. And the U.S. military isn't bluffing. The Pentagon is reportedly prepping the B-2 Spirit, one of the world's most fearsome stealth bombers, for deployment. Originally designed for nuclear warfare, the B-2 is engineered to slip past enemy radar undetected, strike with brutal accuracy, and vanish before anyone knows it was there. The bomber's sleek design isn't just aesthetic. Its curved body and low profile scatter radar waves away from enemy systems, making it nearly invisible even at close range. Its radar signature is about the size of a bird, just 0.1 square meters. But the B-2's invisibility doesn't stop at radar. Its engines are tucked inside the fuselage with specialized exhausts that cool the heat before it escapes, helping it dodge infrared detection from heat-seeking missiles. Covered in a top-secret coating, rumored to include a material called iron ball paint, the B-2 absorbs nearly 80% of radar energy. It was made for night raids, precision strikes, and deep penetration missions with zero warning. Supporting the B-2 in the skies are E-2D Hawkeye radar planes. These aircraft scan enemy airspace and feed encrypted updates directly to the bomber via secure data links, giving the B-2 a real-time 3D battlefield view. All without using its own radar, which could expose its position. This coordination lets the bomber operate in complete radio silence while knowing exactly where everything is, making it ideal for hunting down hidden cartel strongholds. And when it's time to hit hard, the B-2 doesn't hold back. It can carry up to 40,000 pounds of armament, including 2,000-pound JDAM bombs, smaller guided munitions, or even the monstrous 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster, built to obliterate underground targets like fortified cartel tunnels or command centers. These bombs can be dropped from 50,000 feet and fall silently for over 40 seconds, smashing into targets with terrifying force, all while the bomber is already miles away, unreachable and undetected. It also integrates seamlessly into the military's tactical network. It receives mission data from satellites, relays information through secure channels, and communicates using the Link 16 system, allowing it to adapt mid-flight and coordinate with other units in real time. On board, an electronic defense suite constantly scans for enemy radar activity. If it detects a lock-on attempt, it immediately notifies the pilots and suggests evasive action, whether it's changing altitude or adjusting course, to stay under the radar. This level of capability has cartel leaders rattled, because with the B-2 in the air, there's nowhere to hide. Whether it's a jungle lab, a mountain compound, or a hidden bunker in plain sight, the bomber can find it and wipe it out without a trace. And while it can be armed with nuclear warheads like the B-61 or B-83, those weapons remain off the table, at least for now. But make no mistake, these conventional strikes are the most powerful tools the U.S. has short of nuclear arms. And they send a chilling message. The United States is ready to use overwhelming force to dismantle cartel operations no matter where they're hiding. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into the U.S. military's growing fight against the cartels, click the next video on your screen now. We'll see you there.